All right. So, before we start today's class, I would just like to quickly go over what we have done in the past classes, in the previous classes, so we could build on the past knowledge. So
Mhm.
far, we have, let me minimize this. So far, we have looked at a lot of concepts. We look at some arithmetic operations and variables. We look at how to format Python output. We are going to look more into that into this class. We look at the data types, conditions and control flow. How do we control the flow of our program using conditions and loop? We look at loop statement also, and then data structures like list, tuple set, and dictionaries. We're going to see how this knowledge, how all of these topics builds on one another. Now we are looking at functions. Okay, so functions, where are you? The notebook is getting so long now. Okay. Now, quickly, we started doing this last class, and with function is a reusable set of instructions that takes inputs, performs some operations, and often returns an outputs. So the very important term here is that it is reusable. So instead of like copying many lines of code and writing it again and again, we will just put those codes in a function. And if we need to use the command in those does something, we'll just call the function again. So it makes working, it avoids repetition of writing codes again and again and again. So we just need to call the functions, and then excuse me. And then we mentioned that we could define a function without an argument. So although the power of function lies in its ability to take in any dynamic argument value. So here we define hello world. There is no argument, it's just print hello world. So when we are
Mhm.
calling it, we call it with hello world, and this is what it prints. And then here I'm showing that, this is what function tries to do, avoiding having to repeat codes many times. Like here, we are just writing some print statements that
Mhm.
says, hello, I am this is my age, and I am a female. So then to avoid repeating this code again, if you want to use it for another person or another instance, we just put in a function called intro, and we supply the arguments here, name, age, gender. So when we want to call this function, what we do is we'll call the function name, we put the argument values. So this name is going to be for the name, this Nahim will be for the name, this 20 will be for the age, and then the female. So
Mhm.
the arguments in the function above are called required arguments. They are called required argument because their values have to be supplied during the function call. So because we put in the argument when we are defining the function, right? And we did not predefine the values. We only put arguments there. So we have to supply the values when we are calling the function.
Mhm. Mhm.
If
Mhm.
we did not do that, we are going to get an error. So it's important that we put in the values when we are calling the function. But we can set the default values for the arguments when we are defining the function. So setting the default values will make the argument to be optional. For instance, I modify the function intro and I call it intro version 2. And the modification that I did is just to like specify default values for the age parameter, the age argument, and the default value is 30, and also specify default value for the gender, which is male. What this means is with this, I can call this function without specifying the values for the age and gender, right? Because now I have made them to be optional arguments. And the only thing I did to make them optional argument is to predefine the values during function definition. But see, name, I didn't specify any argument values. I didn't put any values. So that is still a required argument. So I still have to specify the value when I call the function. So now, here, when I call intro version 2 and I put just one value, there is no problem. Oh, it's not defined. I have not defined. Let me run all this.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have to rerun probably everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just have to run everything. Okay. Okay, now when I call this intro version 2 with just one argument value, which is for the name, I have no issues. Everything works well. And the other argument values, even though I didn't specify, the other argument, even though I did not specify the values for it, it picked the default values that I already defined when I was defining the function, right? Now, but what if I do the same for the original function info? I'm going to get an error, right? It says missing 2 required position and arguments, age and gender. Do you know why this is?
Well, if we go back up, can we scroll up just for a minute? It would be the same reason. There's intro. So it still needs all 3 identifiers.
Exactly.
Well, identified, if you will. Yeah.
So in intro, we didn't specify default values. So all the 3 arguments are required arguments. Why? Okay. Now notice that
in the placeholders, name, age, and gender, are those all strings? Like, could it be anything, or is the age an integer specifically? Like, could I put 13 and Gerald and asexual, right? And it would still be fine, right? It's not looking for any particular thing.
So we are getting there. We'll get there. So we are building upon this knowledge gradually. So we get to the stage where you need a particular data type, right? For age, it has to be integer, right? If you put in another data type, there will be an issue. We are going to get there. So hopefully we'll get there today or maybe next class. But another thing is, which we are getting there also, is the way you order the argument also matters. And that is exactly what we get into right now. Yeah, so hold on that question. We'll get there very soon. Notice that the error message says position argument. You see, missing 2 required positional arguments. They are called position argument because their position has to be correctly provided. Otherwise, we get an error or unexpected behavior. What am I saying? Let's say I'm saying intro, right? I now put 45. Then I put female here. And I put Gerard. This is going to give me unexpected results.
Right.
Because the order is now different from the arrangement I put in the function definition. So this way, when I call my function like this, I am specifying positional arguments. And it is important that the position is the same as they are in the function definition. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Because otherwise they appear in the wrong place.
Yeah, exactly. They'll just appear in wrong position. And even though there might be a situation where we would get an error. For instance, if maybe in our function definition, we are doing some calculation with the age, right? So that calculation requires that the age is an integer, right, or a number. And then we now have the calling of a function, they put in a string or a text. There will be an error, right? We are going to look at all of this later. Now, this issue can be addressed by calling the function using keyword arguments of this form. So we specify the keyword and we put the value. So for instance, we can say, so this, I'll just call this again, but instead of just putting positional argument, I will change it into keyword. And the key is going to be the argument in the function definition. So I know that this value is for age, right? This is for gender. And this is for name, right? So with this, everything has been corrected. Does that make sense?
It does, only because we already we're defining it.
Exactly.
You know, whether or not there's a positionality to it, we're defining it, so it will plug it in where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. So now, optional arguments. Now, I want you to get this thing. So, in function definition, the argument could be required. For the argument to be required, that means when we are defining the function, we don't specify the default values in the argument. We just put the argument without default values. For instance, def into parentheses, name, comma, name in this case is a required argument because it is just argument. There is no default value for it. But if I say name equals Naim, in that case, name is an optional argument. So even if we call the function without specifying the name, it's going to use the default values, the default value of name, which is Naim. Now, but the thing is that optional argument must follow required argument in a function definition, right? Optional argument has to follow required argument in a function definition. Now, let's say I want to define another function into version 3 now also. Into V3. And I want it to be similar to the ones I've been defining before. Okay, I'll just call this. I'll copy that and put it here. So I have def into version 3. Now, this name is a required argument. This is an optional argument, and this is an optional argument. Now, if I change the arrangement, let's say X, I copy that. Then I make age to be before name. You can see that even we have an error, right? This is because we have committed a syntax error, right? Because we made the optional argument to come before the required argument. So if you run this, we're going to get this. So non-default argument follows default argument. So this is a non-default argument name. It follows a default argument. So this is an error. Do you understand?
So they're saying that the non-default argument follows the default argument. So the optional, another way of saying that is the optional argument follows the required argument. Optional argument follows the required. No, it's supposed to follow the required argument.
Yeah, that's what it means. Like optional argument must follow required argument. That means the required argument or the non-default argument must come first, then the default argument has to follow it. I think I should let me rewrite this. Optional argument.
So non-default equals required.
Non-default equals required. Yeah, that makes sense. Optional.
Okay, yeah.
Optional is non. Oh, sorry, optional. This is default.
Default, yeah. Okay.
Required argument
is non.
Yeah,
non-default.
Does that make sense?
Yes, now it does.
Okay. So that means that when we are defining a function, when you are arranging the argument, make the non-default to come first, then the default will now follow. Okay. Function can return some values. And this is very important because here we just define the function. The only thing that the function does here is to like print some text, right? But if we want to like store the result of some calculation or some expression or something from our function in another variable, we have to return that that value. Let me quickly show you what I mean. Let's say we say def sum two numbers, just sum two numbers, A, B. Now, if we say print A plus B, this is only printing the number. The result is not stored anywhere, right? So if I call sum, I think sum 5, 6, this print 11. Now, if I save this as if I save the result here in A, I cannot do any operation with this again. If I say 3 times A, I get an error, right? Unsupported operand type for integer and non-type. The reason is because I was trying to multiply 3 by the value in A. And the value in A, remember, A is the function call of sum. And what does the function do? It prints the sum of A and B, right? It does not return anything. Now, if I want this thing to work as I expected.
Is that why it's called a non-type?
Yeah, that's why I call it a non-type, because printing is just putting something on display. It is not storing any value. Now, if I want to store the values of this operation, I will have to use return. Return A plus B. So this is now returning the result of the addition of two numbers. Now, with this, I can now store the sum in a variable called a. Oh, I think I shouldn't use a. Let me just use result, yeah. And then multiply my result by 3. Now, in that case, we get what we expected. So what is happening here is that when I call the function, it prints this value, a plus b. That is why we get 11.
And
But
it's
then
non-type.
because I return the sum, so when I now multiply the result by 3, it now gives me 33. Let me comment this one out so that it is not confusing. Now, you see what it returns? 3 times result, which is 33. Does that make sense?
It does, and I guess the question that I had was, so the return, what would you call that? What is return itself?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? It's not a function. Return isn't a function, right? Return is a executable. What is it?
So return is a function. It's a Python function, and it only goes in a function. I mean, return is a built-in function, built-in Python function, just like print. You know, print also is a function. But return is associated with function definition, and what it does basically is to return the result of a function call. Unlike print that only display the result, print will only display the result. So the result,
Sure.
if we use print function, we cannot, we cannot save the result in a variable, right? Print is just
Yep.
only like printing to console, just printing to display, something like that. But return is going to like, okay, you call the functions, you have done all of these steps, all this command and everything. Then you told me to return this result. So I'm going to give this result to any variable that you define for this function.
Does it when it reads this, does it read it from the bottom to the top?
No, it reads from the top to the bottom. It's progressively.
Every time, top to bottom. Is there any cases in which it reads it from the bottom to the top?
No,
No, it's always top to the bottom.
There's never a time where it reads from bottom to top. No.
Well, it's just interesting. So return must be stored in, for a fraction of time until it figures out that the sum is 5 and 6. You know what I mean? And the reserve and the whatever RES stands for again. What's RES?
Maybe I just use any variable. It can be I assume it results.
Results. Okay, great. Results. Okay, so 3 times results. It's just interesting how I understand why it does what it does, and now I understand the return piece. But I guess just as it reads it, it's like it doesn't have the data to return yet. And so I'm like, well, how can it return that if it doesn't have the actual numbers? But once again, it's a function because it's indented. And so it will then read when you go results equals the sum 5, 6, it applies that to sum. Yeah, that's
so let me do something. X.
That's easy enough.
Now look at it. What we do here is we define our function sum. It takes 2 parameters, A and B, and what it does basically is to return the addition of the two numbers, A plus B. Now, if I run this, and now I want to call my function, how do I call my function? I want to
You
call it
just sum
sum.
bracket, and then
Mm-hmm.
two numbers.
Two numbers. So let's say
Yep,
5,
five and
15.
six, 5 and 15. Okay.
Now, you see what it does is that it give out the result 5,
Hmm.
comma 15, 20. Now, the thing is, why return is important or more important than print is that the result of this function call, I can store it in a variable. I can say the result equals to
Hmm.
sum 5, 15.
Hmm.
Now, when I run this, what happens is I'm saying that instead of you showing me the result, I don't need the result now, but I want to store it in a variable. Maybe after some time, so I now say, okay, I now need the result after this, stuff like that. I can now say,
Hmm.
okay, find the percentage of this sum divided by 100. I mean, result divided by 100. Then it gives me 0.2. I mean, the
Hmm.
basic takeaway is that you can
Hmm.
return the result of a function
Hmm.
call and store it in a variable for
Yep,
later use. Unlike
got it.
if you use print that you can only see the result, you cannot use it. Why? Does that make
Can't use it,
sense?
right? It does. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
that's nice.
Okay, so I think we are getting to um a level right now that if it doesn't make so much sense, right? It's okay, it's fine. It gets better with more practice and all that. But what we have covered in the previous classes so far are very important to understand what we'll be doing after this topic, which is like looking into NumPy, looking into pandas, and then start looking into other packages that we use to work with data science and all that. So this one, I just put this one there because I felt like, I mean, the ones we'll be talking about now, we might not do this thing and we'll still be okay, but I want you to have a kind of very, you know, comprehensive, holistic knowledge of Python. That's why we'll be doing all the next topics that we'll be talking about. Okay. Um, if the
Great.
number of positional argument, if the number of positional arguments to a function is not known, if we are not sure what's going to be the number, the length of, or how many is the user going to put in um, 3 argument values or 5 argument values or 10. We are not sure.
Hmm.
To um provide for that possibility, what we can do is we can use wildcard asterisk and then the parameter name. Um, Let me use another. So I would like to build on. Oh, let me comment this out. I would like to build on this function that we have been using. Okay, definition. Okay, put it here. I'll call this version. What should that be? Do we have version 3?
We
Oh yeah,
do. Yep. We want four, I think.
we have
Yeah,
we have
there's
we have version 3. We do? Do we? I don't
yep,
think so.
it's down. Yeah, version 3's down. Right. You commented it out right there. Yep.
Okay, yeah, I commented that. So since I commented that, let's just use um okay. I think 4 is okay. Version 4. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what I want to do here is I want to modify this function a bit. Let's say, I mean, we remember we have been using a function of introduction, and
Hmm.
normally this is enough as an introduction for like, okay, introduce yourself. But let's say the prompt is that tell us your name, your age, your gender, and then the courses you are taking this semester,
Hmm.
right? The
Okay.
courses you are taking this semester, I can be I might be taking 2 courses, somebody else might be taking 3, somebody might be taking just 1. So these are
Mhm.
variable arguments that we are not sure what the length is going to be. So in order to address for that, this is how we are going to do it. So we have our normal function that takes name, age, and gender. And then for this, what we are going to do is, what we are going to do is we're going to call the parameter courses, just like the normal the normal parameter, argument that we have into our function. I would make this one to be required, not optional.
Ah, I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so then we have courses also, right? But then because we want to make it to be a variable argument, we are going to put asterisk here. That is the only thing we are going to put. Put asterisk before the parameter name. Before the argument name. Now, I'm going to now modify my function, put the print statement. I would say these are the courses that I am taking this semester. Does that make sense? Then this
Yeah.
will only print this, but I want to print courses also. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, let's see. Oops, into version 4. Why? Okay, let me now call my function into version 4. Then my name, Nahim. That should be a string. My age, 21. My gender, female. Then courses I'm taking. So I'll just put 1 CS 533, then Geo 560. Does that make sense?
It does. And so now because it's optional,
Yep.
it will,
Because no, what did you say? Because it is optional? No, it
because it
is
is optional, now it'll give us, let's see, did I say optional?
no, not optional. Because it is variable number of
Variable.
argument. Yeah, it's variable. It can be 2, it can be
Variable.
3, it can
Okay.
be 4, it can be 5, right? So that's why after we specify those normal arguments, anything that follows is going to be seen as courses parameter and its arguments, right? So you see what happened. Hello, this is normal. Then these are the courses I'm taking this semester. Then it just lists the courses. Does that make sense?
It does. And so it really does matter positionally where that is. It has to be at the end. You
Exactly.
and it's almost like you couldn't have two of them in there. Well, I guess you could if they were in between the other two parameters.
That's a
You
very
know what I
good.
mean?
That is a very, very good point. So, you could have another, but usually when you have I mean, optional, like variable length of argument, you just want to use one parameter to just say, okay, normally this shouldn't be courses. The common practice is to make this one to be ARGS. You
Ah,
just put it hags. That's the normal syntax. That's the common standard. But it could be anything. It could be anything. So in that case, I'll just put
Args right there.
ARGS. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, gotcha.
So even if I have another stuff that I want to put here, I'll just put it here. Let's say chemistry 502.
And that's interesting because it's the only thing that doesn't have parentheses around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just automatically does that because it's a list of sorts. Is that right?
Sorry, what do you mean is the only thing that doesn't have parentheses?
You know, the
Call it the curly bracket?
the brackets. It's nothing else has the brackets, but then the print args brackets, the variable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
is
so,
that like a list thing? What is that?
s you mean, are you talking about this? Curly bracket? This one?
No, not the curlies, but the actual, brackets, just the regular brackets,
The normal bracket, that's parentheses.
parentheses, yeah.
Yeah.
And where it prints it down there, where it actually is printing it,
Mm-hmm.
on 93, cell 93, and you have your output on cell 93. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it ends up putting it in parentheses. And
Okay,
it's
yeah, I get you. I get what you mean.
okay. Yeah,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
this is very important. I'm going there. So
Okay.
it puts the value in parentheses. Why? Because when you, and this is what I put here, when you put star args, like when you put wildcard and a parameter name, the values you supplied are going to be mapped to a tuple. Python will
Hmm.
automatically map the values and put them in a tuple. And remember when we are doing the data types, we mentioned that tuple are like collection of values, right? Remember when we
Yep.
are doing
Yep.
data type.
Yep.
So
Uh-huh.
that's why when we print args here, it printed it as a tuple.
That makes
We
sense.
we can change this to print it as a list.
Oh, I see.
You see? Now
Yeah.
it's turned into
Right,
a
right, right,
list.
right. Cool. Okay. And then the list would be more handy.
Now you get the point.
Yeah.
Now I intentionally write this thing like this. I intentionally write it like this because usually you are not going to write it like this. Um, let me undo this. Okay. Now, so star args are mapped to a tuple. We can iterate over them. So normally the beauty of having, variable number of argument is that you can start calling each of them one after another.
Hmm.
Now, this is what we want to do next. We want to like start saying, okay, these are the courses I'm taking this semester. One, CS533, two, these, three, these, and all that. And, we're just going to modify this again. Does that make sense? Does that make sense what I want to do?
I think so.
Okay,
I think
now,
so. I'll watch.
okay, now, instead of printing the values as a tuple, I want to iterate over them.
Hmm.
And I want to use for I in, if you remember, I'm very sure you might not remember. When we were looking into tuple data types and
Hmm.
generally sequence data types, we mentioned
Hmm.
that you can get the position and value of a sequence data type using one function. Do you remember that function?
That will be, is it Loc?
Is it? No, no, that's not.
No, no, it's not. It's not iLock, and it's not
We
lock.
have not we have not got into iLock. iLock is like
Okay. Okay.
very particular to pandas.
You would call like, intro version 4, and then you would say, either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Okay. So we are not using indexing. Indexing
We're
is
not
more
using
like,
indexing.
yeah, but this is what we're going to do. Enumerate.
Enumerate, of course.
Yeah. So
Okay.
enumerate is going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
like turn the sequence data type into a tuple again of the index position and the value. Index,
Uh-huh.
right now we have just list of values. So if we
Mm-hmm.
say enumerate args, now what we are going to get from using enumerate is we're going to get a pair of position and value. So I want to store that in I, and I for position and V for the value. Does that make sense?
For position and V for value. Okay.
Yeah.
But you could put anything there, right?
Yeah, I can
It's
put
just
anything. I can put
it's a placeholder is what I
exactly, it's
remember
a
in
placeholder.
enumerating.
I can say
Yeah.
POS and value.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
Now,
Yep.
what I
And
want
then
to do
arg.
is that for pose, comma value in enumerate, I want to print pose, right, comma value. So what I'm saying is that I'm just iterating over the element of my tuple, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting the position. I'm saying, okay, print the position and print the value, print the position, print the value for each element. But
Mm-hmm.
remember, what will this give? Python is zero-based index. So this position will start at 0, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's run this
Mm-hmm.
first. Okay, I'm going to run this thing again, the same thing, but now I'm going to call it version 5.
I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly.
Okay.
So now when I run this, now look at the difference now. These are the courses
Mm-hmm.
that I'm taking this semester. 0, 6, 5, 3, 3, 3, 1,
Mm-hmm.
Geo 560, 2,
Mm-hmm.
Chem 502,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? Do you see the difference between this and this?
Right. And when you enumerate, or if you iterate over them, right,
Mm-hmm,
using enumerate,
mm-hmm,
um, then you're going to get an indexed base position from
mm-hmm,
that, not
exactly.
just a list. Okay.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Okay.
I can actually, I can iterate over them without the index. I can just say, okay, before I do that, let me say, I want this one to be nicely formatted. It is Python that start reading with 0. Normally we as human, our count start from 1. So I'll just POS plus 1. So
Mm.
it will like, okay, 1,
So start with one.
CS533,
Yeah.
2,
Gotcha.
0, 563.
Hmm.
But then
Hmm.
I might decide that, no, I don't want this. I don't, maybe I'll just say for value in args, print value. So this one, you see what this does? It only prints the value. It iterates over the elements and prints just the values, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Because that's the priority. The priority is the values, not the
Exactly.
position.
Yeah, not the
Okay.
position. So it depends on how
Yeah.
we want to format the
Hmm. Hmm.
output. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But I think I prefer this. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, if you do not know how many keyword arguments that will be used, sorry, if you do not know how many keyword arguments that will be passed into your function, you can add 2 asterisk. This is doing the same thing also, but the difference between this and the one we just saw now is that this is using, keyword argument. So in this case, like in this situation that we just saw, the pass position argument, there is no keyword argument, right? They just pass the values without keywords.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want them to like pass the keyword, like tell us what is the key for this value, we have to use double asterisk, and I'm going to use the same
Oh,
function,
okay.
right? And I'm going to copy that and put here.
But when you say key, they're not key pairs like a dictionary. It's just a key word in
Yeah,
that list, right?
so
Yeah.
that links together. They are keywords. They are like, okay, this is the key and this is the value. But just like Python turn the other one into tuple, Python
Mm-hmm.
will now turn this one into dictionary. That is where the connection comes.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
So because it
interesting.
has keys now, right? It has keys and values. So Python will now turn it into dictionary. Remember, dictionary is the data
Mm-hmm.
type for storing key value pairs.
And in this case, the key is the one or the two or the three, and they're calling that the key, right?
Exactly. So the key might be 1, 2, 3, or it might be any other key that the user defined. You're going to see that
Okay.
later. So
Okay.
now we have star 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 args. Now this has turned it into variable keyword arguments. Now, if we want to use these now, remember we can iterate over our dictionary using a particular method. And I'm going to, if you remember that method, we call it, so we can iterate over our dictionary using some methods. If we use dictionary dot keys, if we use dictionary dot keys, it is going to give us just the keys for that dictionary.
Oh, oh, okay. Okay. Huh.
If
And
we
so
use
you would, uh-huh.
dictionary dot um, values, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to return just the values. But if we
Mm-hmm.
use dictionary dot items, it's going to get the key and the value returned to us in a tuple. Before I go for that, let me just do
Oh,
something.
interesting.
Yeah. So this is where you see how each of these topic builds upon one another. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say
Mm-hmm.
print args, right? So you see what args looks like now into version 6. Into v6, I will just call this again. Do you know what is going to change now?
Give me a sec. Um, it will be, and we have the two, it'll be how it's indexed. It'll somehow like maybe have some curly brackets, like
Makes
a
sense.
library.
Yeah, exactly. So because we say it's not a curly bracket, it's you said the way it is indexed, right? The way it is called. Because we say key value, right? Key and value.
Mm-hmm.
So we are
Mm-hmm.
going to put the key here. Like CS533 is, you know, computing department. I'll just say computing equals CS533. I'll say
Hmm.
geophysics equals geos. I'll say this one is chemistry equals chem 503. So the difference between that one, the variable number of arguments, it's that for this, we call those values with the keyword. It's then like key. Remember, we have position argument, we have
Yeah.
key word argument. Now, this is keyword argument. Now, if we call the function in this way, you see now that this
Huh?
is returning
Okay.
what?
Right.
This is a dictionary.
Just like a keyword list in a dictionary. Is that
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Whereas the initial one is what? Is a tuple.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that shows us that the way we iterate over, this dictionary return values is going to be different, right? And that was why I was mentioning that if you want to iterate over the let's say we want to iterate over the values, just the values, right? Iterate over the values, right? I'll call this v7. So here now, instead of printing the dictionary, I'll say for value in the parameter is args dot values.
Ah, okay. Args dot values. Oh, interesting.
Print val.
Val.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah,
So
it
I will now
actually
say
does.
into version 7. I'll just call all of this. All right. Okay, so this is going to change now. Now you see, it gives us just the values now.
Uh-huh.
Unlike this, that gives the key value pairs. If we want to iterate over the keys, what are we going to do? What are we going to do if we want to iterate over the keys?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah,
So then you would just change it. It would be keys, args dot keys.
exactly. Over the keys, so just say keys. So now, if we run this, we see we have just the keys: computing, geophysics,
Great,
chemistry. But
great.
usually the beauty of this is to iterate over both the keys and the values, and then to put it like, okay, computing from computing department, I'm taking these. From geoscience, I'm taking these. From these, I'm taking these. So to do that, we'll just say iterate over the keys and values. So we say
Key,
key,
comma, val.
comma,
Okay.
val, but this one is going to change to items. Remember,
Oh,
that
okay.
is what we use to iterate. I'm going to show you when we are talking about dictionary. You see, items to get the key value when looping through a dictionary. And this is what we do. I try to make this notebook to be, because it's, trust me,
Items.
it's I'm taking my time to build the notebook because it's going to be very, very useful for the next things we'll be working on and all that. All right.
Super. Yeah.
So where are we? So now we key comma value in our dictionary dot items. Now we want to print key let me use F formatting. So print key, put semicolon, put column, and then print value. Just nice formatting. You see, now we have computing, CS533, geophysics, this, chemistry, this.
Yep. 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 And now you've changed how the list is
Yeah.
um displayed more or less.
Yeah,
And I guess okay, yeah, just
just
because you
formatting.
can.
Yeah, just formatting.
Okay, okay.
Okay, makes
Hmm.
sense.
It does, yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
this is it. I know I'm taking too much of your time, but if you want, we can call it. We can stop here.
Oh, okay. And then what do we have after this?
Yeah, so I have the content for the next class tomorrow. Yeah, so for the next class, we'll be talking about input and output formatting. How do
Hmm.
we? So we look, the formatting style for our print statement. We are going to look
Hmm.
more into how do we customize that more? How do we control the output? How do we change the style? So we're talking about that more in the next class. So this is using the print, and then we'll be talking more importantly on how do we work with files,
Oh,
right? So
cool.
far, we have been
All
like,
right.
okay, what if the result we get, we want to like store it in a file, or we want to read from a file and all that. So we're talking
Hmm.
about how to work with a file. And then from there, we'll be talking about how do we handle errors and exceptions? What are errors and what are exceptions, and how do we handle them? I
Oh,
mean,
that's cool.
you mentioned something about what if, you know, we define a function and we expect that the user should supply an integer, but then they put in a string, right?
Yes.
To
Yep.
be a way for us to like to catch this and tell them to like, no, you have to put an integer, something like that. So this is what we're going to be talking about in the next. And then finally, we're going to talk about object-oriented programming. How do you create classes? How do you create objects from classes and instances? And just going to be a very brief introduction to object-oriented programming. And then
Hmm.
we're going to wrap up for the first section of this class, which is Introduction to Python. It is Introduction to Python, but it's very, very condensed. So, but
Hmm.
this is very important to understand the next stuff that we'll be doing.
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. That looks great. That'll be a good section to go over. Well,
Okay.
thank you for your time again.
All right.
And as far as any compensation goes, how are you feeling about that? Is there some exchange of money here? What would you like to do?
Um, so okay. I would like to mention first that thanks for bringing money up. So I wanted to say that going forward, because I mean, when I do something, I would like I want to see um the the benefit of it, and I always like to like put in all my best to put the best stuff outside. So I
Hmm.
was thinking about a way to make this, because by the time we get to I mean, these are still going to be like the classes to come. By the time we get
Hmm.
to like statistics and all that, I might need a kind of a whiteboard, a kind of, this writing pad, so I
Uh-huh.
can share, you can easily see how the calculations going and all that. So
Hmm.
yeah, it would be nice if you can get that so that I can use it to like
Can
you know
you
what I
se
mean?
can you
Like,
send me a link, an
yeah,
Amazon
I
link
could
for
send
that?
I'll send a link to you. It's like a pad that it will make writing on the whiteboard, like
I
when
get
I
it.
share a whiteboard,
Yep.
easy, right? And then
Yep.
my handwriting will be easy. So yeah, that's that. Regarding compensation, trust me, I I'm not going to. I don't. Whatever you want to do is fine. I'm okay with it. Trust me.
Well,
I'm not focused about the money. Trust me. I'm not
mhm.
focused about. I'm not so bothered about the money.
Okay.
So it's fine. I just like doing this. I just like
Yeah.
doing this, and
I can tell.
when I
I can
see
tell you really enjoy it.
when I see that you are
It's really nice.
interested in this and all that, I mean, I feel like, well, it's an opportunity for me to really do what I like doing. So it's not about the money.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. I really appreciate that.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, send me the Amazon link, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to